This video is brought to you by YTAndrewPaul Tech Repairs. If you have a console, laptop, computer or Macbook in need of repair in the UK or the EU, then have a look in the description below this video for details on how to contact us in order to organise your repair. Right, hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's video. And today, as promised, we are going to do this HDMI port replacement on this SAD001 revision motherboard from a PS4 Slim. So this is a PS4 Slim HDMI port tutorial. And today we're going to replace the port on this one because this one has indeed had a whack. So this is a new style of HDMI port. As you can see, there's this rather funky sort of grounding clip design which pushes onto the motherboard shielding to provide some additional reference to ground. This port, as you can see, has had a good old whack across the back. So there are the pins. Look, you can just about see them sticking out. Yeah, it's had a bit of a tupping as this port, to be honest. So if we have a look on the bottom side of the board, you'll see there the ground holes are there with the, what do we call it, with the solder in there. There's a couple of components behind it. Now the diode there, and I presume that's the pin 13 diode, is fairly close to the bottom of the port, so you're going to want to be careful here that you don't get too carried away with the hot air. That wouldn't be good. So we're going to apply some flux here to our port, and we'll also apply some. I know we can't see much of the pins on this port at the moment because somebody's gone and smacked them off, but we will try and get a little bit under the port there just to try and get this thing loose as easily as possible. So we're going to flip this back over, and whilst we're at it, I'm just going to adjust the camera, so just bear with me a second. Okay, so that's where the port is. I'll get it in focus for you just in a minute. I'm just going to try and level the board out. Okay, and there we go. So we've got a little bit more focus for you there. So now I need my soldering iron and things. Good, I've got the fat tip installed. Cracking. So I'm going to get some fume extraction in place here. Just bear with me a minute while I get all this sorted out, and then we're going for it. So ideally, I mean, I wanted to try and do a little bit of live streaming as we've previously been over. I've said that, you know, it's on my list of things to do. Blah de blah de blah de blah de blah. That was months ago. I've bought all the hardware for it, and then I've suddenly realised that my Blackmagic Intensity Pro actually doesn't support 60Hz at 1080p, which is a real big bugger up because actually my scope camera is 1080p at 60Hz and I can't change it, and generally speaking, the PS4 outputs 1080p at 60Hz. Yes, you can force it back to 50, but it's a real pain. So it's actually making my life incredibly difficult. So I'm going to have to find some way of forcing everything to use 50Hz so I can use it with the capture hardware. Alternatively, I'm going to have to look at buying a Blackmagic Intensity 4K, which will do 1080p at 60Hz, and it also captures on 4K in the event I ever need to do so. So at the moment I'm sort of favouring trying to find something to output things at 50Hz so I can capture it using the existing hardware, because it was 180 quid, and frankly I haven't got that much money kicking around at the moment because through one thing and another, getting married in December and everything else, I'm actually a little bit light on funds at the moment, so I don't have money to be replacing capture hardware I've just bloody bought. Yes, I probably should have checked it in the first instance. Yes, I'm a bit of a wazzock for not doing so, but what can you do? Anyway, generally speaking, you will notice on the quick these days, yeah, we have a kink tip, which means I can get underneath here and do some work quite happily. So that metal tape is wanting to wander, so we'll take that off. And as before, we have our air one set at 490 degrees C at 100 litres of airflow per minute. And we're just going to work back and forth across these ground planes, paying some attention to the centre as well, of course, because we have the pins on the top side of the board, the 19 pins which provide us power, data and ground to our HDMI port input, or output in this case, should I say. So we're just going round. We are concentrating the heat generally, mostly, on the 4 ground pins. Of course, the ports sit on a fairly large area of ground, which is going to act like a big old heat sink. And it's going to try and pull the heat away from our port and into the board. So it's going to try and absorb the heat like a sponge, which isn't exactly ideal for us. So just going to try and get this as hot as possible. Working back and forth. And the key is here is to be patient. You don't want to be too impatient and try and push things out, because pushing things generally leads them to breaking. We want to work this back and forth for a minute or so, making sure, you know, we hover over the centre of the board and we go over the ground pins. We keep everything nice and hot, nice and loose, and eventually our port should want to drop out. Now then, one thing I will say about the Quick, since I've put this kinked air tip on, it doesn't actually seem to be as potent as what it used to be. It actually seems to have dulled the performance slightly. So we're still not wanting to go anywhere. So the key here is to try not to get too impatient. Don't try and force anything. Don't try and push anything out. Okay, so we'll provide a bit of heat to the rear of it then. Let's see if we can get some movement there. Okay, so we're going to have to just try and attack it from the top. And there it is. Oh, it's weird. That's the first time I've ever had to do that with a PlayStation HDMI port. So, if you're having trouble from the backside, you're going to have to go topside and attack it with a bit of hot air from there. So it's useful to know. Generally speaking, I will just have a look now and see if we can try and work out exactly what the hell the cause of that was. Anyway, it doesn't look like there's anything particularly there that would stop it coming out. I mean, it was a little bit of a worry at first. I thought, hang on, have they glued it in? Is there something underneath the board that's holding it in place? Have they tried to epoxy it to give it a little bit of strength? But apparently not. Apparently it's just a stubborn little bugger. So, oh well. What can you do? Anyway, the main thing is it's now out. So, and we haven't got any damaged pins, which is cool. So, annoying, but hey ho. So we are just using a little bit of IPA on a cotton swab, cotton bud, Q-tip, whatever you like to call it. Flux is being very stubborn this afternoon as well. They do seem to be quite efficient at transferring heat away, these boards, by the looks of things. Anyway, there we go. That'll do. Right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, so now we've got the port off and we've got the other side of the board on show. We're just going to prepare this part of the board now. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a drop more flux. And don't worry, because all this flux residue is going to get cleaned off before we've finished. What I usually like to do is just get the biggest part of it off, put it back together for some basic testing, and then once all that's done and it's tested and we know it's all good, then we'll go and give it a thorough clean before it all gets properly put back together. So what we're going to do is we're just going to apply some leaded solder to the port header. This will just make resoldering our new port legs a little bit easier. Once we have our port in position. Okay, so that looks pretty damn fine to me. We've got no bridging between the pads there, that's good. All our pads there are nicely loaded with plenty of solder. So we're just going to go ahead now and replace our port. So this is the first SAD board I've done. So we're about to find out just how well these donor ports line up. Quite hard to get hold of at the moment, and they're quite expensive when you do. But hopefully they'll line up pretty nicely without me having to do too much to them. So I'm just going to support the board for a second, and then I'll get you all back in focus. There you go. So what this is going to be a case of is you're going to need a pair of grips, needle nose pliers, something like that, and we're going to get hold of the port like thusly. See if we can get you focused in. So you can see there we've just got our jaws on the very front tip of the port there. I'm going to drop this into the hole. So we're going to get our hot air wand back online here. So as before, we're using the same temperature and airflow to remove as we did to remove the port, I should say. So that's 490 degrees C at 100 litres of airflow per minute. And we're just going to go in here now, and we're going to melt the solder. So my apologies if I obstruct the camera view for you there for a second, but. And we're looking for those locating holes, the 4 at the side there, to go shiny. And the solder that's sitting in them wants to sink just below the surface, so hopefully you saw that there on the right. Now just about on the left. Oh, looks like it's melting quite nicely there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to offer our port up, drop it through the holes, hold it straight. Hopefully that's going to look good. So I'm just going to check this, make sure it's located firmly against the base of the board. Let's say that's looking pretty good. So what we're going to do now is get this soldered. So just going to get the port back in view here. Everything's straightened back up. Everything nicely focused down for you. Now then, here's the pain in the backside, because as I can see it, oh, this is gonna make life awkward on these ports. But they've got like a new structure on the top of the port here, which pushes the base of the port against the grounding shield when it's actually back inside the machine. So on the 1200s, it actually used to be a separate piece of metal. It didn't really matter if you left it off, but on this particular occasion what they've done is they've incorporated it into the actual body of the port, so you can't lose it. So it's quite nice in a way, because a lot of people used to forget to put them back on. However, it does kind of restrict your view underneath the microscope on a couple of those pins there, so that could get interesting. Anyway, we're just going to add some more flux there. For those of you who ask, and it does get asked quite a bit, this is Amtech RMA223 TPF UV flux. That's the type of flux that this is. So for those of you asking the question, because it does get asked quite a lot, certainly recently I've noticed it's getting asked a hell of a lot. And I'm also asked for where to buy it from, and the honest answer is that it's been so long since I've actually bought that tub that I've completely forgotten where I bought it from. Which is a problem, because I'm running low on it now and I'm going to need some myself. So when I do actually find it again, I will be sure to put a link to it in the appropriate video. So I can't actually see bugger all here, so I'm going to try and angle this up slightly so I can see what I'm actually doing here. There we go. So what we're doing is we're just putting a slight little bit of downwards pressure on each leg, and we're just hesitating the heat onto each pin, and then what I do is I roll the tip of the iron off down this way, so that we get some contact with the actual pad as well, and that just makes sure that we have a nice strong even joint on each pin. Now then, as we've done for the other board revisions, at some point I will do a diagram for these as far as rebuilding the circuit goes, you know, if you're missing pads and what have you. So I'll try and do that fairly quickly, if I can think on. Got a few of these machines in the shop at the moment. Seemingly with no power issues actually, which is interesting. Haven't looked at them yet. Probably will look at them on camera if I get a chance to do so. If I get the time to do so, I will do that for you. Alright, okay, so all our pins there now flowed into position. So we're just going to give this a quick clean off with some IPA. And so as before, we're just going to get the biggest part of this up. Not too bothered about it looking like an entry to a beauty contest at the moment. That's not what we're trying to achieve at this point. We're just wanting to make sure that we get the biggest part of the flux and whatnot off. Can always go back once we know this thing's working while we go to final reassembly to make sure it's all pretty and that the flux is completely off there, because flux can become slightly corrosive to the board over time, so it's never a good idea to leave it on there if you can all help it. A little bit of IPA, rubbing alcohol, whatever, on a Q-tip cotton bud. A relatively sort of stiff bristle brush will get rid of most of it, unless you've got an ultrasonic cleaner, which is on my list of things to get next. Certainly because obviously I want to get a little bit more serious into the Macbook repair side of things, and water damage, liquid damage is commonplace on that type of machine. And you're definitely going to need an ultrasonic cleaner for that sort of work, so that's definitely on my kit list. Next piece of kit to buy. I nearly bought one a couple of months ago, but the finances just didn't quite allow it, but hopefully before Christmas we might get a chance for that, maybe. Okay, so it's got the biggest part of it up, so we can see there now that our pins are nicely soldered. Okay, so what you might want to do is just give them a quick nudge test. So this is going to be awkward because I'm going to have to hold the board with one hand, but you know, it needs to be making sure that none of this is loose, so you just want to give it a gentle push. You don't want to be too hard here because you can put some bending forces on the board. You're just looking for anything loose that's going to move when you nudge it. Remember, you're not pushing hard here, you're not trying to break the pins off the board. But they're fine, they're lovely. So, that's done, ladies and gentlemen. So our port's in, we've got no bridges, we can see that quite comfortably. There's no bridging there, all our pins are nicely soldered, we can see that they're nice and solid when we push them. So that's done. So what we'll do now, we'll get it reassembled back into the PlayStation, get a test, hopefully we'll have a working PlayStation with an SAD board in it. Well, we almost forgot, didn't we? Almost forgot. Do you know, I was sat there then at the end of the recording and I'm thinking, I'm sure there's something I've not done yet. Sure enough, check these ground pins. Now they probably would be okay, but you know, you can see they look alright, you know, but they'd probably survive. But I want to make sure they're nice and solid. So we're just going to go and pop some solder back on those. So to do that, we're going to get some flux on those bottom 4 locating pins. Well, the good news is, anyway, at least, that the replacement ports do line up very nicely. They're like the V2 ports on the old style PlayStation, you know. They line up nicely, they don't need to be adjusted, rolled over, bent. I'm impressed, which is cool. So, I'm just going to apply what we would do. Beep, there we go. Right. I do have a slightly smaller chisel tip available to me, actually, which I'm thinking about breaking out of its packet for these SAC and SAD boards, because obviously, as you've seen, the components are quite close by. To those port locating pins. It's very easy, if you're not careful, to actually catch some. And then that's just going to create a whole ton of work and a whole lot of mess. And I haven't got any of these boards in spare, so you know, I dare say we can find the same components on the SACs, but why put yourself through it? So again, we're just going to go and get the biggest part of this off. We can make it look lovely and beautiful later, but for now, that'll do. So yeah, as I was saying before, now let's put it back in there, let's give it a test, and hopefully it'll be working. Right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we have our Slim PS4 with the SAD revision board back all assembled again. So I'm just going to fire it up now, and hopefully they're very, very quiet, these things. The fans on them are remarkably quiet. But here we go. So PlayStation logo, back into OS. So there we go. Automatically turned off due to power saving settings. So there you go. So yeah, I'd left it running for a little bit, but there we go. So as you can see, we're all back up and running and back into the OS on screen. So not the easiest thing to do. They do seem to dissipate heat quite well, these boards, but you know, as you can see, the little bit of jiggery pokery, got the port off, and I got the new one in fairly easily in the end. So it's one to be mindful of, though. Unfortunately, the SAA, SAB, SAC revision ports do not fit these, so you cannot use the old style ports for these new SAD and PS4 Pro boards. These use the new sort of newfangled design that we can see there with a little clip on the top. So unfortunately, that's another part you're going to have to carry if you're doing these for a living, but you know, we all have our crosses to bear, I do suppose. So that's all back in and working again. So thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you found this useful. As always, feel free to drop a comment below. You know, if you've got a question there, pop them in the comments. I've also accept private messages on here, on Twitter as well. DM box is open to everybody on there. And you know, I do offer this service out these days. If you're in the UK or the EU and you want a repair, then by all means hit me up. At the moment I'm working on my website, but for the time being you can get me via email. Of course, that is YTAndrewPaul at outlook.com. The link should be in the description below if you want to see that. And drop me an email then by all means. You know, I'm here and available to service your machine as and when you like. So, you know, as before, if you have any comments or questions, please pop them below. Emails, ideally only business use, really. Like I said, for repairs and things like that, you know, because otherwise it tends to clog my inbox up with hundreds of messages asking me things when really, to be honest, they're better off in here so everybody gets the benefit of them, because otherwise I'm going to end up answering the same question God knows how many times over. So if you can stick to that little rule there, boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen, then I'll thank you for that. So as always, I've been Andy Paul, you've been fantastic, and I will see you fairly shortly, hopefully. I'm going to say not so long, before the next video. So for me, it's bye bye for now. Many thanks for watching then, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then why not check out these recommendations below. Also, please remember to comment, rate, and of course subscribe to the channel if you found this useful. We've plenty more content on there, and there's lots more to come.